Lists, indexing, and slicing. First thing I want to point out is that, as I mentioned earlier, it's very similar to strings as far as indexing and slicing go. And so we will talk about that in this lecture, as well as a few other nice to know things. First of all, how to create a list. We create a variable and assign it to square brackets. It can be empty. It can be just square brackets that will create an empty list. Or we can have our data within the square brackets. Needs the square brackets. Each entry in the list is separated by a comma. As we see here, comma, comma, comma. Very important. That's how Python knows what's in a list. Don't worry about this little bit right here. I will talk about this in a second. You see there are multiple commas here, but that is only one entry in the list. We can also use this construct of list and parentheses to create a list. Now, as far as indexing and slicing, if we recall what we've talked about with strings earlier in the course, are two ways to do this. We can do positive indexing or negative indexing. And it works the same way as strings. Positive indexing will go from the leftmost part of the list towards the right. And again, it's zero-based. So the first item in our list, and this represents our list right here, the very first item in our list, car, we see the very leftmost item, is referenced with the 0th position. And as we go to the right, we increase the number. So in this case, the third item in the list is represented with the second index position because we start at 0. So tree would be referenced with the second index position. And negative indexing is just the inverse of that. The last item in the list is -1. That's the last item, whatever it is. So in this case, it would be true. And I do have a slight typo there. This should be only uppercase T, lowercase RUE, as we see here. I apologize for that. And as we reverse index just towards the left, we just increase the negative value or decrease the actual value, as we see that working there. And slicing, we can select portions of the list with a start and an end, or a start, end, and step. In other words, move forward this many positions. That's what the step is at a time. So we could select this item, every other item, for example, using a step. And one note is end is non-inclusive. So if we do start, end, that will not be the actual value. If we end at the 4th index, it will be this value will be the end. And I'll show you an example of that. One thing to watch out for is out of range indexing, just like strings. So if we have our list defined, this is the same list I've defined up here, and we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 items in the list. So if we print the 5th item with our 5th index item, which if we look here is actually the 6th item, we see that it prints out true. But if we try to reference an index position that is not within our list, we will get an index error. So index position 6 we see does not exist. That would be one more. So watch out for out of range indexing. And lastly, before we dive into some examples, nesting. I want to mention nesting. And that is how we can have a list or multiple lists inside of a list. That is what this 4th index position item is. It's another list. So if we access this item at the 4th index position, it will return a separate list. And that is called nesting. Nesting a list inside of a list. All right, let's look at a few examples here. So we've got my list, and that is assigned this value. Remember, open square bracket, close square bracket, and then values separated by commas. So what if we want to access the 0th element, the 0th index position, but the first element? That will return car. What if we want to access the first 3 items? We can slice it 0 through, and now remember that last element is non-inclusive. We will go to 3. However, that index position would be this item, but it won't include that. It will include these 3 items. As we see, car, 5, tree. Negative indexing, we can do -1. That will give us the last element in the list, always, which is true, in this case, a Boolean, which we've learned about Booleans. And let's go back here and see if there's anything else we want to discuss. I think that is it for this slide and for this lecture. So we will see you in the next lecture with more about lists.